Hi, you guys. We're going to take a look at the media's role during an election year. And as previously discussed, we took a look back at history. We took a look at how the media affected elections when it came to John F. Kennedy and Nixon and FDR. But today we're going to take a look at our current situation. First of all, let's take a step back and look at when the media covered the 1976 election, which was Jimmy Carter. And it was an interesting year because as with Jimmy Carter, he was this genteel Southern gentleman, and people seemed to really respond to who he was. And so the media did that as well. And that a lot of people really believe that that had an effect on the election because of the way it was covered. So he was a Democrat and he was Southern, and there were things that people really thought made a difference in how the media covered that. But then let's step forward. Let's take a look at when Bill Clinton ran. Bill Clinton was this gentleman from Arkansas who had gone to Georgetown. Then he was a Rhodes Scholar who went to Oxford University. And then he got his law degree from Yale, and he married an attorney. And so he had this charisma that people really embraced. And Al Gore was his running mate, who was from Tennessee. And so there was all of these kind of interesting things happening. He was Democrat, but people liked him. He was smart. He was funny. He could play the saxophone. There were all these things about him that people thought were very interesting, and so they embraced him. And as he ran for president, he was really a front runner. And then the media actually embraced him right up until the time that he had some indiscretions with Monica Lewinsky, and his career remained intact somewhat, even though he went through impeachment trials. But then the Senate said that no, he could stay president. But Monica Lewinsky, actually, her career was pretty much ruined. And then it was more interesting because you had Hillary Clinton, who was this strong, independent woman who said, "I'm standing by my man." And so that was something that was really interesting as the media watched and it unfolded, and how they covered that was interesting as well. So then Hillary Clinton ran against Donald Trump, and she recently, a few years ago, published a book, What Happened. And in the book, she took blame herself for some things that went wrong, but then she also blamed Trump, Russia, the FBI, and so she placed a lot of blame in that as well. And she felt like she couldn't get past that glass ceiling that exists in politics or with the media. And it's not determined really if people were not ready for a woman to be president, or if they weren't ready for her to be president. Because in some ways, people looked at her as dishonest, and they were not impressed with her as much as they could have been. The weird thing is that over 50% of newspapers had endorsed her. And so going into election night, when we were waiting for results, people were really expecting her to come out as the first woman president. And so that was just an interesting time for media as well to cover that. But here we are. We're in the middle of a presidential election with Donald Trump and Joe Biden, and Mike Pence is the vice president on the Republican ticket, and then Kamala Harris is this first woman in a while that we've seen, and so she is on the ticket with Joe Biden. And so we watched a debate that was the presidential debate, and the rest of the world commented. It was horrific on many levels because it was hard to hear. Not everybody could understand what was happening. They didn't feel like it was a real debate. They felt like it was actually three, not two, men in the room who were all being bullies on the playground. They also felt like it was this dumpster fire. And so the rest of the world was watching, and there were tweets sent out by political leaders in other countries that said they've sent condolences to the American people. They sent sadness that we were a nation that had been watched for leadership, but we were no more. And then communist countries and authoritarian countries actually said, look at what's happening with a republic nation right now. This is a hot mess. And so all of these things were coming in. So it makes you ask the question, does the media control the message and have a determination of who's going to be president, or has the presidency and the candidacy and the election process actually become mass media in itself? Then we were able to see the vice presidential debate, which was much more calm, much more civil, and an actual debate. And there were some zingers throughout the night, but we saw the media take a look at that and actually say, usually that's a non-event, but considering what happened before, this was actually refreshing. And there was that darn fly that caught the attention of the world that landed on Mike Pence's head. And so he kind of kept going though, so we have to respect that, because whether he knew the fly was there or not, I'm not sure, but he kept going and didn't let it sway him at all. And there were times that they were very respectful to one another, even though they were having a debate. So no matter who we think won the debate, America did win that night because we actually saw a debate. So there have been many hot topics. Joseph Clapper, and he actually discussed the two-step flow process and the hypothesis, and he believes the media has less power than previously expected. Once upon a time, we thought the media had this huge influence, but now Clapper actually has questioned that. He realized that people turn on one another when discussing major events and elections and the U.S. presidency, and sometimes that can be a good thing, but sometimes we actually turn to each other and we ask people we ask people who are mentors, we ask people who are in our friend group or who are our bosses. We talk with them and make that decision. Now, most of the time, people would say that minds have already been made up by the time debates get here, but there are a few that's on the fence. An interesting concept from the other night was listening to supposed reports from the undecided. And so we will still see. We don't know what's going to happen on the night of the election, but we know that the media is covering it strong. Agenda setting it's definitely been a thing, especially during such important matters. We this year are under the most unusual circumstances that had ever been in any election during my lifetime. So there are things like making the public aware. The media actually was designed and thought to be the watchdog for America, and hopefully they can still serve that capacity and place importance on that and find out what's real news and what's fake news. And the picture can be separated. Sometimes that's difficult and sometimes it's forgotten. But the mass media are major shapers when it comes to elite political culture, according to Lowry and DeFleur. With this capability, they become decision makers. However, the human experience is always it's just kind of it's undecided, and it can go either way. Like we said earlier, many people thought Hillary Clinton was going to win in 2016, and as humans go, we're unpredictable. Another question that just really surrounds everything is, does the media do they adhere to ethics? Can they report fairly? And then furthermore, what about the fact that you have maybe the New York Times who straight up calls Trump a liar, but then Trump turns around and goes at them on social media saying that they're fake news, and on we go, and we just kind of have a fight back and forth. So there's just it's all craziness, right? The question goes back, and goes back as far as we can know. Are the candidates reflective of the culture in America? Or are our leaders what we see and reflect? It's just something that it's a constant struggle to know what is the right and what is the wrong. As a matter of fact, there have been so many new ideas, and then where does new media step into the game? Because more than ever, people are saying, more than 50% say they get their news from new media, social media, which is Facebook and Twitter and TikTok or wherever else. And so more than ever, people say, I just take a look at that and get my news and don't watch the news because it's depressing and I don't want to be told how to think, even though we are told what to think about. So there are those kind of issues as well. Some people will confuse new media with news, but it has taken on a news. Civic journalism is actually a thing now. We cannot deny it. It has come into our reality, and it's not going away. In an election year, it really proves true. One of the very strange things that took place not too long ago was when President Trump was holding a rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they thought they had sold out of free tickets. And actually what happened, or what is reported to have happened, is that teenagers took to TikTok and K-pop. They all had a campaign going to order these tickets and then not actually show up to the rally. So instead of 19,000 people being seated in that arena, there were only a little over 6,000, which makes an arena look pretty small, or pretty not well attended. And so that was an interesting thing, because it could be considered the ultimate senior prank, or it could be considered a way of new things happening in our world. One person said, "You just got rocked by teens on TikTok who flooded the Trump campaign with fake ticket reservations and tricked you into believing 1 million people wanted your white supremacist open mic enough to pack an arena during COVID." CBS reported that only 6,200 people attended. So whether TikTok actually prevented the numerous people from attending, or if that was COVID or there were protests, we are not sure, because there are differing reports on that. But social media has a lot of power when it comes to what happens during a presidential election. While they also have a lot of work to do to really be considered valid in a political arena, the social media is fierce and it's not dying anytime soon. So another form of media that has really stepped into the game is late night talk shows. Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, Seth Meyers, Samantha Bee, on and on. There are all these people who are actually stepping into the game, and they're having people on who are that are presidential candidates or vice presidential candidates, or people who want to talk about those things. And it has been said that under 40-year-olds are watching those shows, and about 40% are getting their news from those avenues. Whereas once upon a time, they would have picked up a paper, they would have listened to radio, they would have watched CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, but instead they're sticking to some sarcastic people who are on late at night, and they're getting their news media fixes and presidential opinions from those things. And so it can happen. A jump or a spike can happen just from those things. And then finally, where does this leave America? History has shown that America can be where it needs to be when it rises to its potential. A symbiotic relationship between media, public relations, and advertising, and politicians. When all of those things work together, America wins. But when the relationship is severed, everyone loses.